Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. We are in the home stretch of the book titled The Power of Silence by Horatio W. Dresser. The long title adds that it is an interpretation of life in its relation to health and happiness. While it seems that this book could be about meditation, it dives into so much more and reveals the why of it, the what of it, and the how, in a way that invites anyone to partake of it as a daily, non-intrusive practice. The author used words very much like a surgeon would use surgical tools to conduct an operation, yet there were no technical nor heavy philosophical maxims used. And he used very simple words to cross the chasm of deep questions of the origin of God and our purpose in life. The health and happiness points that he discusses were like a byproduct of truths that stood there revealed in plain sight as the author turned over the reins and invited us into the world of inquiry. In these next few chapters, he will discuss how cultivating poise can enable individuals to face life's challenges with dignity, maintain clarity of thought, and exude inner calm and grace under pressure. I hope you enjoyed this read. If you are new and found me at this video, please make sure to visit my playlist to grab previous chapters. And to my family and friends and subscribers, welcome back. I now turn the page. 7. Poise. The one essential alike in the interpretation of life and in wise adjustment to its inevitable conditions is the knowledge that there is one and only one reality, whose being therefore transcends and includes our own and all that can ever form an object of our thought. All else is contained in this. All else follows from this, if we pursue our inquiry far enough to learn what that reality is and how it is made known. The supreme problem is to know how best, most economically, most healthfully, and happily to take the eternal order, not simply as we find it in the outer world, but as it is made known within as a part of the life of the very consciousness and substance of that one reality. For if this is literally true, if the world system is the self-realization of an infinite God, it behooves us to know it, to make this knowledge the guiding principle of life, since the universe cannot then be a world sent from deity, apart from him, the product of mere caprice, to be some time destroyed when the caprice shall change. It must endure as long as eternity shall last. It could no more be destroyed than the self-existent reality, whose conscience it is. The world plan could not be changed without departing from the highest wisdom and purest love which God must possess in order to be the one reality. There is the strongest reason, then, for taking life as it really is in this largest sense, since it must be part of the best possible world plan in order to be a fact at all and be self-preserving. Everything that occurs in your life and mine must have some meaning in this world plan, for nothing could come forth at random from an infinite wisdom. There is no other reality, and we have no independent life. To let this one purpose have free expression through us, so far as it relates to our individual career, this is life in its deepest and happiest sense. This is health and poise. But before considering this final element in the problem of adjustment, let us ask, what is to be the ultimate outcome of life's aspiration? What is the real meaning and purpose behind all these mysterious experiences and trials? Is it not the development of a soul, and is it not for lack of spiritual self-possession that we are whiffed about by opinions and fears? What is a soul? One may as well try to define the larger self, from whom, as we are persuaded, the soul's noblest aspirations come. Yet we know perfectly well what we mean until we are asked to define it, and we have some conception of that eternal realm of thought, superior at once to space and to time, where the poets and philosophers dwell who speak words of comfort to the soul. Our own deepest reflection transports us there, and we seem larger as a result of our meditation. There are experiences that call us out of and above ourselves, noticeably those that make one acquainted with grief in its larger sense, and the soul seems to expand with the new experience. We know when, on the one hand, a man's soul speaks through his words, and when, on the other, he says one thing with his lips and thinks another, thereby trying to conceal his soul. The whole being speaks through a perfectly genuine act, through truly ethical conduct. We mean something genuine, something honest, appealing, and true, bespeaking that indefinable thing called personality. It is a part of what we call character and temperament. It is that which endears one to those whose life gives us a glimpse of God and makes one feel assured that life, if it produces such a thing as this, is well worth all its hardships. It is the test of all that is dearest and truest in human experience. It is that which transcends, yet gives unity to the physical, the intellectual, and moral man. Through it comes that wisdom which leads man to act better than they know, which bids one to be calm when there is seemingly reason to fear and grieve, which assures one that all will be well even when reason opens the way to the profoundest doubts. It is the meeting point of the eternal, never-changing spirit with the ever-varying experiences of human life. And many feel confident that we are far enough on the eternal side so that life will be continuous from this experience on, so that we can affirm personal immortality. Our deepest life, then, is a continuous incoming of renewing, sustaining power welling up from the heart of the universe into the spirit of man, a continuous divine communication engaged in the rearing of a soul. The deepest self is not physical, nor even intellectual. It is spiritual. We are spirits now, in germ it may be, but insofar as we are conscious of our life in God, that consciousness will probably never be broken. Man is not a body with a soul, but a soul or spirit, which in every well-poised person is master of the body and of the powers of thought. Now, if the soul stands uppermost in importance, it is our first duty to keep the soul on top. Many people work so hard at their vocations that their souls have no room to expand. They are lawyers, doctors, financiers, with whom business stands first, not men in the spiritual sense of the word. Anything which subordinates the soul and prevents man from taking all that belongs to him as a free spirit in a beneficent world, any mistaken sense of humility or self-suppression has a harmful effect on the whole life and is evidently as far from a normal attitude as strong self-conceit. If one have continued impulses to do good and suppress them, a reaction is sure to follow. It is better to express the impulse, even in a slight way, if one cannot realize one's deepest and fullest desire. Theological creeds often suppress the soul. One feels a desire to be larger, freer, and to think for oneself. Want of charity, continued fault-finding, the attempt to do a task that is beneath one, narrows the soul. Love of the truer sort, broad thinking, open-heartedness, happiness expands it and has a marked effect on the health. Sacrifice of individuality to the control of a stronger mind suppresses the soul. Education often crushes out originality. Now, we were evidently designed to be free, to have strong, manly individuality. It is well, therefore, to consider wherein we are held down by people and circumstances, and to discover how we are cramping our souls. The soul should be master, and the powers of thought should be free. Do we not yield part of our manhood or womanhood the moment we give way to worry, to continued grief or discouragement? On the other hand, is not the realization of what we are as living, growing spirits who use the body as an instrument and control it by thought, who dwell with God and need never fear any permanent harm, is not this the way to free ourselves most rapidly from all that would hold us down? We have all experienced those calmer moments when we quietly faced our fears, our doubts, and our wavering opinions, and as calmly dismissed them, henceforth powerless because we saw their utter absurdity. Half the battle is won when we see our error and realize the possibilities of the soul. We are momentarily masters of the situation. We are more truly and profoundly ourselves. we discover our inner center and become poised, grounded on eternal reason and calm in eternal peace. This is at once the highest use of the will and the truest spiritual self-possession. For it is in these moments of calm decision, when we realize our relationship to eternal power, that the mind changes and brings all things round to correspond to our deep desire. The ideal of daily conduct is to maintain this inward repose, to keep it steadily and persistently in view, to regain it when we lose it, to seek it when we need help, to have a calm center within which is never disturbed, come what may, a never-yielding citadel of the higher self. It is evident, then, that the whole of human life, and all that we have considered in the foregoing chapters, may be restated with deeper meaning in terms of soul or spiritual experience. The soul must learn what it is and why it is here. It must gain this knowledge by actual experience in order to learn the value of right conduct, in order to learn that there is a wisdom, a love that is equal to all occasions. It must descend into density or matter and become acquainted with darkness and sin in order to discover the meaning of life and become conscious of itself as an individualization of God. It struggles upward and forward to completion. It is ever trying to come forth and express itself. And when man comes to consciousness of what it means to develop a soul and of the divine trend in his personal life, he no longer resists this deep moving. He comes to judgment in his own soul and sees how he might have acted more wisely. With this deeper consciousness comes readjustment to life and more soul freedom. His soul finds better expression through the body, not in some future existence or in another body, but here and now. For even its experience in the flesh, our soul experiences and demand not punishment in the flesh at some distant time, but better and truer conduct in the eternal now. If anything is purposeful in the universe, then it is the life, the aspiration and character, the soul of man, as it passes from stage to stage in its progressive experience, unfolding and giving to the light the divinity involved in its very being. It is the knowledge of this permanent factor in so much that is passing and trivial which gives one poise and strength to pass through any experience without fear that it may prove too hard. People disturb us. They narrate their troubles and describe their sensations with painful minuteness of detail. Crowds, city rush and noise deprive us of our peace. Be as watchful as we may, we find ourselves going off on a tangent, on a tirade of fear, or on a round of gloomy thoughts. We are misunderstood, ill-used, and wronged. Our faith is tested to the utmost, and we are pushed to the wall. There's obviously just one wise course to pursue in all such cases: not to be disturbed, not to enter in the painful narration, not to rush with the crowd, nor to countenance gloomy thoughts, not to feel uncharitable, revengeful, or unforgiving, since one will only add more trouble, but to regain one's poise by such thoughts and realizations of who we are as progressive beings, and what the power is that is with us, as the occasion may suggest. Find your center. Learn to know your home in God and what He is doing with you, and you can safely let the great world go on, and let nature's organism right all wrongs and heal all hurts. I need hardly remind the reader that it is not so-called willpower that invites this repose, but the higher and truer will explained in the foregoing chapter. People who are strong in themselves alone obviously have no poise in this deeper sense as a soul experience. Those who reach out after the ideal as though it were somewhere far off and not imminent in the real, who look forward to the future with a nervous strain instead of living in the present where help is alone to be found, lose what little poise they have and fly aloft on a burst of enthusiasm. The consciousness is concentrated wherever we send our thought, and if we reach out or pray to God as a distant being, the thought is sent away from its proper sphere. It were better not to have ideals at all than to strain after them and assert that they shall become facts at once. For nature's method of measured transformation through evolution is the only wise and health-giving course to pursue. To know that everything we need is within here and now, this is poise. Realization, not assertion, is the method of this book. A realization which teaches through actual communion with it that there is an omnipresent wisdom to which we can turn at any moment and in any place of which our being partakes, and which is so near to us that we have no wisdom, no power, no life wholly our own. We are so accustomed to think of the divine nature as wholly unlike and separated from our own character that it is long ere we can make this realization a fact of daily consciousness. We have taken credit to ourselves for qualities which inhere in the very essence itself. We have limited our worship of God to one day in the week, to one place of prayer, and sought His revelation in one book. Dogmas have crystallized about us, and we have hardly dared to think for ourselves. Yet a little reflection shows that we must be, partakers of an omnipresent love. That not the Bible alone, nor any other sacred book, but every book through which the soul of its author speaks untrammeled, every divinest impulse, all that spurs man on to progress, all that is most sacred, is a revelation of God, for He is not an exclusive, but an inclusive God. This being so, we obviously do not know ourselves, do not possess ourselves, and have no permanent center of repose until we discover this inward kingdom of heaven. When we discover it, life seems just so much the larger and better worth the living. We learn that there is something within that will teach man better than any mere thought of his own, that he has a wellspring of guidance and inspiration in his own soul. It gives quietness and comfort to know this fact. Nearly everyone has had such guidance at times, sudden warnings of approaching danger and impressions not to do this or that, and help has often come to us during sleep. But this realization of the nearness of all knowledge gives a reason for such experiences and encourages one to believe that they can be cultivated and relied on. Then, too, it gives one confidence and strength of a truer sort, not in self-consciousness, and the products of one's own intellectual development, but in that larger self which is crowded out by all sentiments of pride and self-satisfaction. One loses fear, one ceases to worry about one's friends and to suffer for wrongs that one is powerless to prevent, when this realization becomes a fixed habit of thought. For if God, and not man, is behind events, we can safely trust the universe to Him, and not only the universe, but our friends, our suffering and ignorant fellow beings, and our own souls. The sense of officiousness is displaced by a feeling of patient trustfulness, and we spare ourselves a deal of unnecessary suffering. And I need hardly add that one not only gains greater repose, but the health is immensely benefited, since the disease-making directions of mind no longer have a chance at us. Education of the truer sort brings poise, for it develops individuality, health, and strength of intellect, which in turn means health and strength of body. Physical exercise, music, or any line of work which rounds out the character and acts as a balance wheel is essential for the same reason, since it draws the activities out of the narrow and therefore unhealthy directions of mind. Those who are very intense in disposition often find it necessary to exercise vigorously in order to counteract this extreme mental activity, until by degrees they become less and less intense and learn to work moderately and easily. There is an easiest, simplest way of doing everything with the least degree of strain and nervous anxiety. We do not learn it while we hold ourselves with the grip of willpower, when we try to work our brains and force the activities into a given channel. Self-possession forgets all about the body when it is using it. It interposes no obstacle to the physical and mental forces. It discovers, the easiest method of concentration through inward repose, and finds in this quiet restfulness the greatest protection from nervous reaction and fear. Poise, then, is a word of degrees. Many have it on the physical plane and are apparently seldom disturbed in their physical life. Systematic physical exercise brings control of the muscle of the body, and with this control, a certain degree of poise. In learning to play a musical instrument, one gains it through long training. And we say of a great musician that he has repose, that he plays or sings without effort. But one may have bodily repose, yet have no repose of character, and may be the victim of a veritable whirlwind of nervous excitement within. Those who are aware of their own mental development and soul growth are usually conscious of touching a deeper and deeper center, and with each experience comes added poise and readjustment to life. Every trying experience demands a strengthening of one's faith or a deepening of one's self-possession. For the natural tendency is to fear, worry, and doubt. We are not sure of ourselves until we have met and undergone the test of a severe experience. Any experience, then, that strengthens this inward repose is rather a blessing than a hardship. Is it too much to say that we can become equal to any experience whatever and meet it unmoved within, in quiet trust and perfect faith? Surely, the possibility is worthy of our consideration. If we have proved to our satisfaction that 2 and 2 make 4, and that the result will always be the same, we are undisturbed by those who affirm that the result should be 5. So far as we have rationalized experience and discovered certain laws, our conviction is no less certain because nature, like mathematics, is a system on which we can rely. If the reader is convinced that God is immanent, or that evolution, so far as science has described it, is a true statement of life's process of becoming, this knowledge furnishes a basis on which to reason. It gives poise and inspires trust. To be sure, the conditions may change, and other forces enter in to counteract and modify the results in a given case. To the forgetfulness of this fact is due the tenacity with which some people cling to their beliefs, simply because they are unaware of these modifying circumstances and causes. Doctors seem justified in affirming that disease is a physical thing, that organic and chronic diseases cannot be cured by mental means, because as a class, they are unaware of the deeper aspects both of the cause and the cure of disease. But the exceptions only go to strengthen our faith, since every effect is like its cause, unless a new element be introduced. Then it is invariably different. The laws hold true universally, and if the reader has grasped the few great but highly important laws of human life, he can now rise superior to moods and experiences, troubles and illness, which once would have caused fear, doubt, and a great amount of unnecessary suffering. Simply to know that every event has an adequate cause, that action and reaction are equal, that experience depends on our attitude towards it, and that with a change of mind, a new directing of the will, the forces of our being are brought round to correspond with it, without any further effort on our part. This simple knowledge is enough to give us poise and make us masters of our fate. One's method of adjustment to life or one's optimism need not necessarily be the philosophy of this book. There are as many approaches to it as there are temperaments, and this is just the point of this chapter. Have a method. Have a soul of your own. Be your true self. Think, realize, reflect until you have a measure of unborrowed conviction which establishes a center of repose and is a source of happiness and contentment, a center which yields to no outer tumult but is ever receptive to the divine self, which never harbors fear or doubt, no matter the wavering self may say, which never wavers, never forgets that the individual belongs to the universal, never relaxes its hold of the deepest, the truest, the most spiritual in life, come what may, be it sorrow, illness, or any calamity which life may bring. A center which you will probably discover at last rests on the love of God for its strength, making it part of eternity and of all power and substance, though it be but a point in the infinite whole. And when you lose this poise, regain it, as though you would say, "Sit still, my soul. Thou at least must not lose thy composure, nor thy awareness of the eternal presence of God." Those who are nervously inclined will find it necessary to stop themselves many times a day when they discover that they are under too great pressure. They will find themselves hurrying unnecessarily or inwardly excited. Oftentimes, all that is needed in order to prevent serious mental and physical trouble is to take off this pressure and find this quiet inward center. It is wonderfully refreshing and removes fatigue to relieve the pressure and open the spirit to the healing power. Simply to turn away from self and all that destroys repose to the self which knows nothing but peace is sufficient to give one help and strength at any time and in any place. The wise direction of mind opens door to help. If we trust, if we expect it, the help will come, whereas the effort to make it come will put an obstacle in its pathway. To know how to rest, this is the great need of our hurrying age. We are too intense, too active. We have not yet learned the power and supremacy of the spirit, nor the value of quiet, systemic thinking. We struggle after ideas. We read this book and that, and go about from place to place in search of the latest and most popular lecturer, instead of pausing to make our own the few great but profoundly simple laws and truths of the spirit. We are unaware of the power and value of a few moments of silence. Yet, it is in our periods of receptivity that we grow. Not while we actively pursue our ideas do we get the greatest light. Oftentimes, if the way be dark, and we can get no help, it is better to cease all striving, and let the thoughts come as they may. Let the power have us. For there is a divine tendency in events, a tendency in our lives which we can fall back on, which will guide us better than we know, if we listen, laying aside all intensity of thought and letting the activities settle down to a quieter basis. Here is the vital thought of this book. Its most urgent appeal to suffering humanity and the soul in need. Part of its teaching can only be verified by experience and must seem merely theoretical to many readers. But here's a thought that is for everyone. A simple, practical thought that leads to and includes all the rest. Let us pause for a time, think slowly and quietly, and not leave it until we have made it our own. Silence invites the greatest power in the world, the one power, the one life. Let us be still in the truest and deepest sense of the word and feel that power. It is the all in all. It knows no space. It knows no time. Its slightest activity is universal and eternal. It surrounds us here and now in this present life, this beautiful world of nature, of law and order, this inner world of thought and the soul. It is the supreme wisdom and perfect love. It knows no opposition. There is naught to disturb its harmonious, measured, and peaceful activity. It is beauty and peaceful itself. Its love and peace are present here with us. Let us then be still. Peace, peace, there is nothing to fear. In this one restful, happy moment, we have won the peace of eternity, and it is ours forever. Who that has communed with the power of silence in this way can do justice to the unspeakable joy of that one moment of rest and peace. It is not a thought alone or a suggestion that brings it. It is something more than so-called thought. It is inner stillness. It is the receptivity of the soul. It opens one to the thing itself, the eternal peace. Many will find it difficult at first to banish other thoughts, and it is better not to force the stillness to come, but to let the agitation cease by degrees, letting the thoughts come until they quiet down for mere want of conscious attention. When at last the thought no longer wanders here and there, but is poised in the present moment, and the feeling of peace becomes uppermost, it is better to seize definite thought altogether and simply enjoy the silence. One will then have a sense of incoming power and of newness of life which no other experience can bring. This may not be the result at first, because it is only after repeated trials that one learns how to become still. One may even be made more nervous by the simple thought of stillness. It is often easier to realize this peace for another than for oneself, but the result will in time be the same. The consciousness will be drawn away from self and physical sensation, and this, after all, is the one essential to rise above self into the nobler world of altruism and the spirit. Some have found it helpful to set aside 15 minutes each day for quiet receptivity of this deeper sort. Then, when times of trouble and suffering come, one will not lose one's self-possession, but will know how and where to find help. The instance is related of a student in the University of Leipzig who was in such an intense state of nervous strain that the students and professors were much alarmed at his condition. By some good advice, he took up the habit of sitting quietly by himself for about 15 minutes each day, in absolute silence, maintaining as nearly as possible a state of perfect composure and muscular rest, banishing all thought and all activity. In a short time, he made a very noticeable improvement and finally recovered his health. The mere effort of maintaining an easy, relaxed state of mind and body had relieved him of the inward pressure. He had unconsciously realized the power of silence, and it had healed him. If one fails utterly at first to gain this silent repose and becomes still more restless, one should not feel discouraged. That is just the moment to rejoice and to know that one has succeeded. The experience is the same in all efforts of reform. The first result is to stir up and encounter opposition. Suppose for a moment that the reader is impatient and, seeing the error of his ways, decides to exercise self-control. Very likely he will lose his patience on the very first occasion and act or speak impulsively. Discouragement naturally follows, and the reader forgets one of the great laws of growth. The law, namely, that a period of darkness, of regeneration, of sharp contact with all that can rout itself into opposition, follows the reception of new light, of greater power. Conservatism and habit are ever ready to rise up and say that there shall be no reform. All healthy changes are evolutionary, not revolutionary. We forget that an idea, like a seed, has life and, if sown in the mind, will grow. We forget the outcome. We often falsely accuse ourselves of sin when the relapse is really due to a firm determination to be better. If we keep the end in view, if we have an ideal outlook, we can safely let the disturbance be what it may. Quiet persistence is the word. Each effort to renew our ideal adds to its evolutionary power. Keep your eye fixed on the eternal, and your intellect will grow, says Emerson. One's first real success in attaining this inner repose sometimes comes alone with nature, when, standing in silence under the pines and thinking in harmony with their whispering, or awed by some grand mountain scene, one freely and fully yields to the spirit, the calm, the rhythm of one's surroundings. Afterwards, one can return in thought to the mountain summit, where the eternal silence of the upper air was so deeply impressive. Or one can imagine oneself by the sea, where the ceaseless ebb and flow of the surf on a sandy shore once quieted the troubled spirit, or afloat at sea on a beautiful June day, listening to the regular play of the waves along the steamer's side. Any thought which suggests silence will produce the result until one gets in the habit of thinking in harmony with the rhythm of nature, just as one can learn to rise and fall with the motion of a steamer as it responds to the steady waving of the ocean. Everything in nature seems to have its ebb and flow, its alternation of a day and night, of activity and rest, the one blending into the other throughout the seasons and the centuries, the strains of a grand symphony carrying one in thought to this region of rhythmic alternation. One is glad enough at times to lay aside present problems and everything that is modern, and read the great authors who wrote for all time, or read some history or scientific work which transports one to the past and gives one a sense of time, of the long ages and the periods through which the earth has passed and man has worked his way. There seems to be a corresponding rhythm in human life, with its ups and downs, its joys and sorrows, its successes and its failures. Yet the interval is often too long for our short-sighted discernment. In the night of trouble and despair, we forget that the day will surely dawn again. We occasionally emerge into remembrance of what it all means, and we think that now at last all will go well. Then comes the descent. We are plunged once more into the depths, where the facts of life are seen at the close, pessimistic range, and once more our memory fails to hold over. But in due time, these contrasted experiences fall into a system if we reflect on their meaning. We are awed by the eternal fitness of things. A stronger hand and a profounder will than our own is revealed in the fabric of our soul, which no purely human effort could have knit together. We're almost ready to affirm that whatever is right. It is true we make many apparent mistakes. Within certain limits, we seem to have an infinite choice. We are conscious of wrongdoing. We deliberately sin sometimes, and we have much to regret. Yet a time comes when many of these experiences yield up their meaning. We justify mistakes in the light of their outcome. Each hour of conflict had its place in teaching part of life's great lesson. A world of truth flashes upon us through the memory of some wrong act, and we question the wisdom of the slightest regret, since we have acted so much better than we knew. This soul experience, this personal evidence that we have been guided, is for many the strongest assurance that our world order is the best possible order. They are conscious of being led to certain lines of conduct at the right moment. They see their humble place in the world and await the next step in quiet expectancy. One may as well tell them they have no eyes as to deny this inward guidance, for it leads them from task to task with a certain system. If it does not tell them what to do, it at least opposes no obstacle, like the famous Daemon of Socrates. It either speaks definitely, or it opens the way to the soul in repose, not the soul that thinks it knows how to act and gives the deeper self no room to speak. One cannot hasten it. One cannot always discern the proper course until the proper moment. It often comes unexpectedly, causing humility and surprise that so much should be given us. But the right thought comes in the fitness of time to those who quietly await it. Thus one is drawn at last out of the narrow prison of one's own self-consciousness and physical sensation into this larger thought of the whole. It gives rest and trust to feel oneself part of a fabric so wonderfully and systematically woven, where the world plan is not alone concerned with the selfish needs of one man, nor the wrongs which one would like to see swept away because we do not see their meaning, but with the total needs of all as related to the total universe. One loses all sense of time and space under the power of this grand thought of the transcendent wholeness which shades off into eternity. This transient thought of ours, this divine moment of time, is a part of that eternity, It links the limitless future with the irrevocable past. It is just as important, just as truly a part of eternity as any moment could ever be. We learn that we are in eternity now, not that it is something to come. We try to comprehend what it means in eternity now, in infinite time, in boundless space, or better, above all time and space, where one power, one law, holds all events together, where each and all are inseparable and necessary parts of the one reality. If we dwell in eternity, why need we hurry in soul, whatever bodily hurry may be required? Why should we not dwell here in the everlasting now, instead of reaching off somewhere in thought, anticipating the future in death, as though there would ever be a break in the stream of life? If we as souls dwell in eternity, is not our life continuous? It surely cannot die if it enlarges into the infinite, eternal life, else it would not be life, but mere physical change. Even in physical disintegration, there is no annihilation, not even the minutest particles ever lost. Can we believe anything less of the soul? Must we not believe more, namely, that the aspiring consciousness and sense of individuality remain unbroken? If the Great Father has a purpose with us, however infinitesimal, as applied to you and me, it must be a part of His infinite life, and there is nothing to break its continuity. In some of us has been born a desire to live forever. It is probable that we are no more responsible for that desire than for our deepest faith in God. In the supremest moments of human life, it is He who stands by us, not we by our faith in Him, and we would fain doubt Him if we could, but we never quite persuade ourselves that He will fail to fulfill every deepest desire and justify all the conditions in which we have been placed, though it take forever. There are times when we seem to dwell in a region where all is good and wise and true, for we have momentary glimpses of the sublime wholeness of things, the sublime reason, the sublime end, a region where, if we have not all power, we at least have as much as we can make our own, and a faith that knows no doubt. Yet it is no credit to us that we have this faith, this belief in God. We did not originate it. If I display goodness towards another, I partake of the nature of God in some degree. The love of God speaks through the heart of the mother. It must be a part of the infinite love, since we all belong to Him, and if we had any power wholly independent of Him, all men, all things would be independent of Him. There would be no fundamental unity, no omnipresent inclusive reality, no universe as we know it. The life, the power, the goodness, the love, the groundwork of the universe, of men, and of the soul must be the all-inclusive self, and human nature, however individual in its history, must be at each moment in some measure dependent on the universal. One's soul is not one's self alone. It is also God's emphasis of some phase of His own nature, the attention of God fixed on some object. One's unquenchable faith is ultimately God's unfailing love. We believe in Him because He knows us, because He possesses us, you and me, and has need of us, because He has made us aware of His presence. He loves us, and we trust Him because we must. He has aroused interest in our minds in the deepest problems of life, problems which it will take eternity to solve. And if we long to solve them, we may thus know that we are so far immortal, because this interest is fundamentally the eternal purpose of God. This realization of our oneness with the unthinkably great and eternal, which brings us just as near to it and makes us just as much part of it here and now, in this present moment, as though we were in this great wholeness and had lived from all time, is strengthened by considering our indebtedness to the world. Here we are in this beautiful, beautiful world. How wonderfully it is wrought. How systematically it has evolved, governed by exact laws and animated by unvarying forces. It is our own home, we can rely upon it and on that heaven-taught instinct which guides its creatures better than the combined wisdom of all mankind. What a delight to exist! What exceptional pleasures come to us at times among the mountains, by the winding streams, the peaceful valleys, the great ocean, inspiring awe alike in storm and calm, and ever suggestive of that whole which unites us all. Days are continually recurring which stand out above many others because of some charming scene in nature, some impressive communion with the spirit of the woods or the hills, while the dreariest day in winter or the most barren landscape in nature will yield its gift of beauty if we seek it. The poet and the artist see all this and live in a diviner world because they are watchful. But the beauty is there for us all, to inspire contentment if we need it, to reveal the good if we look for it, and do not let the habit of narrating and seeking only the bad control us, and to make us thankful and trustful when we consider its deeper significance, its correspondence to the beauty of law and order, of need and supply in the inner life. Then, too, the beauty of human character more than all else endears one to life and gives one joy in existence. 2 or 3 noble friends are all the world to some people. Where they are is home, and where they are is always happiness and contentment. One is constantly being touched by little acts of kindness and devotion. Sometimes in the country, even among simple folk, one draws very near to the heart of humanity. One is moved beyond words, for nothing conceals the honest hearts that reach out to one in all their native feeling and sincerity. Such experiences have a wonderful effect upon the recipient when put aside the darker aspects of life, with those undeniably evidences of wickedness which might otherwise almost persuade one that human life is corrupt to the core. Omit these darker experiences we cannot, in trying to cast our thought into some sort of system, but in daily life we are too inclined to dwell on them, especially to enlarge upon our own woes, to describe every detail, so that, as a result, our friends form harmful mental pictures of them. We are apt to contemplate these dark facts and never get beyond them. We stay in gloomy surroundings and then call the world ugly. It is well once in a while to pass in review all that should cause us joy and thankfulness, to ascend the mountain, whence we can look beyond the ugly spots and see their relation, and, after all, it is a beautiful one, to the great landscape beyond. I do not speak alone as one who has stood on the mountaintop and thought the world beautiful, but as one who has suffered keenly and critically in the darksome vales below, who has met with the severest losses and suffered the deepest disappointments, and has had a most intense nature to overcome. Our poise is worth little if it fail to give strength and composure in any possible experience, and to be itself strengthened by the newest trial. The experiences and realizations suggested in this chapter prepare the way for the severe test of actual life. If we habitually realize what it means to dwell with God, what the soul is, and how it is approaching completion, and keep the ideal of adjustment to life ever before us, pausing in silent receptivity whenever we become too intense, into the thought will steal the renewing and strengthening power, which will prepare us for the day of sorrow and the hour of supreme suffering. 8. Self-help. We have now considered the general attitude toward life whereby the vital truths of the spirit may become concrete in daily experience. We have found that attitude to consist in recognition of what man is as a progressive being and in wise cooperation with the indwelling life which resistlessly carries him forward to completion. There is a tendency, a guidance in the soul of man which will lead him onward if he will listen to it. It will guide him in every detail of life. It will help him in every moment of trouble. It is with all men. It is used by all men, for otherwise they could not exist. But to the majority it is unknown and unrecognized, simply because they use it unconsciously, and to assure them that they can have such guidance seems to them the merest folly. To know it and to distinguish between the merely personal thought or inclination and this diviner moving is to live the higher life, a life which seems infinitely better and happier the moment one learns to make this most helpful discrimination. To turn to it in times of doubt and trouble is to regain one's poise, to become adjusted to life, to gain the truest self-help. Ordinarily, it is sufficient to hold this possibility in mind and to maintain an ever-deepening consciousness of our life with the Infinite Father. Contaminating influences cannot touch us. Fear will have no power over us. We shall respect this inner voice rather than the opinions of men, and escape a large proportion of the ills which neither the mind nor the flesh is heir to. This realization will add a meaning, a depth and beauty to life, which the reader who has not yet made it a factor in daily experience can hardly imagine. Simply to discover that so much depends on our mental attitude is of itself sufficient knowledge to work a wonderful change in the lives of those who ever bear this vital truth in mind. For if we begin life afresh with a determination to see only the good, the real meaning and spirit of things, it will be impossible for our old habits of thought, our fears, and inherited notions about disease to win their way into consciousness. The road to better health, to unhoped-for happiness and freedom, is open before us. The better health shall be ours if we have the will, for nothing can resist the power of thought. The body, our fixed directions of mind, and even our temperaments will yield when we learn how to use this marvelous power. But there are experiences when we need something more than this general knowledge of how to take the deepest life just as it is, and in order to make the application of the foregoing principles perfectly clear, so that the reader will not only know what to do in times of trouble and suffering, but how to help a fellow sufferer, let us once more consider the actual process of change in mind and body. In considering the qualities and composition of matter in Chapter 3, we learn that the phenomenon of expansion and contraction is one of its most noticeable characteristics. Turning to the mental world, we found the same principle repeated, namely that thoughts are harmful or healthful to the degree that they expand and contract the inner being. Fear, jealousy, anger, and all selfish or belittling emotions have a tendency to draw one into self, to shut in and restrict the activities, impeding the natural life and restorative power of the body, and developing a condition from which, if it be long maintained, nature can only free us by a violent reaction. Whereas a pleasurable emotion, such as one feels when listening to a familiar melody or the strains of a great symphony, causes the whole individual to expand and sends a thrill to the utmost extremities of the being. There is a whole vocabulary of words in common use expressing the warmth and coldness of human beings. In fact, the two faculties of intellect and emotion, or head and heart, are often taken as types of these fundamental characteristics. And we speak of this church as cold and intellectual, that one as warm and spiritual. So hard it is for one to combine the two. Again, considering emotion alone, we speak of warm-heartedness. It seems to be outgoing, expansive, and if one give to another or do some act of kindness, that act has a tendency to repeat itself. The person is touched, on whom the favor is conferred, and immediately feels a desire to reciprocate or to show kindness to another. On the contrary, let the emotion be selfish, let the person decide to do a mean act, and there is an instant withdrawing, a self-contraction, and narrowing of the soul. Happiness, joy, genuine pleasure, and self-denial are expansive emotions and oftentimes wonderfully catching. With the one emotion comes self-forgetfulness and lack of restraint. With the other comes self-consciousness and painful awareness of sensation. Love is warm. Selfishness is cold. Happiness expands, fear contracts. Thus, we might pass in review the whole category of human emotions, and if we could trace their physical effect on the minuter portions of the body, we should probably discover that the molecules are either drawn together or drawn apart by each emotion. When the shock is too great, whether the emotion be one of joy or sorrow, death results. There's evidently then a state of equilibrium where, on the one side, the body is harmoniously open and free from restrictions, and where on the other, the mind is also open or in repose. This emotional effect, with its accompanying physical changes, may be further illustrated by the sudden and marvelous cures which have taken place in all ages and are occurring today. It is a well-known fact that these wonderful cures usually occur either among people of strong faith or among ignorant and superstitious, in other words, highly emotional people. The alleged cures performed through the agency of sacred relics, at holy shrines, at Lourdes, and other well-known wonder-working centers are wrought almost wholly among strongly superstitious people who are ready to accept certain beliefs with all the energy of their being. It is a truism today to affirm that miracles are impossible. The whole fabric of 19th century science rests on the knowledge that law is universal. If then such cures occur, and they are too widely attested to doubt them, they must take place in accordance with a certain principle. This principle is evidently the one already suggested, namely, that the bodily condition changes when the emotions are touched, not only in sudden cures, but in all that constitutes the emotional life. And the reason is found in the existence of the subtle intermediary known as spiritual matter, which immediately responds to the slightest change of feeling and translates it into the bodily condition. The stronger the emotion, other things being equal, the more remarkable the effect or cure. Emotion of a certain sort, noticeably expectant attention accompanied by implicit faith on the part of an invalid before a sacred relic, has a wonderfully expansive and liberating effect on the body. The whole thought is concentrated on what is about to occur. The individual is lifted above self by the emotional experience, and the physical forces are no longer hampered by fear, morbid awareness of sensation, and the 1,001 feelings which interfere with the natural restorative power of the body. The emotion frees, opens the body, so that the interpenetration forces may once more circulate between the particles. Density is broken up, and expansion takes place, and a process of change, which usually occupies many weeks or months, is completed in a short time, resulting in the cure of many so-called incurable diseases. Here then is an important fact underlying the entire process of cure and self-help. A change for the better results when the emotions are touched, when some thought or feeling penetrates to the center, freeing the soul and causing an expansion of the whole being. Something must quicken the activities and rouse the individual to new life. Bedridden invalids and lame people have been known to rush out of burning buildings or forget themselves in their eagerness to rescue a person in danger, completely recovering their health through the sudden change of mind. In other cases, where the patient is selfish in disposition, the chief task is to find some way in which the person shall begin to live for other people, some interest which shall take the thought out of self and thereby open the person to the healing power. Whatever be the method employed, the use of physical remedies, prayer, foreign travel, anything that arouses the confidence, the affection, the interest, or even the credulity of the sufferer will produce the same result. On the other hand, any remedial means which fails to move or touch the soul is of little efficacy in effecting a cure. The problem, then, is to discover the method whereby the individual shall most quickly and easily be touched, so that the healing power shall have full and immediate access to the troubled soul. But what causes the emotional change? Why is it that so many people who receive no benefit from medicine are cured by forgetting self and becoming absorbed in some benevolent work. If ignorant and superstitious people can be cured quickly because they are credulous, if cures of all kinds and among all classes largely depend on the faith or confidence put into the remedial means, is there not some deeper law which governs all causes, by the discovery of which the intelligent can be cured as quickly as the superstitious? There can be but one answer to these questions. It is the thought, the mental attitude, the direction of mind which governs the whole process. Before the sudden cure can result, there must be faith, expectant attention, and if the person have implicit faith, the whole individual is governed by this one powerful direction of mind. The emotional experience unconsciously opens the soul to the life or spirit which, like heat, enters into and expands the whole being, just as the warm sunlight penetrates the very fiber of the plant. It is the spirit that performs the cure, not the personal thought or faith. The human part consists in becoming receptive, in withdrawing the consciousness from self and physical sensation, and becoming absorbed in the expected cure. The personal self, the fears and wrong thoughts have stood in the way and barred the door where the spirit sought to enter. The new direction of thought changes all this and makes way for the spirit. It is a redirecting of the will, and in the wise use of the will, as we have seen, lies the greatest human power, while its misuse is the most potent cause of trouble. Of all known forms of the one energy, then, thought is the most powerful, the most subtle, and probably the least understood. Used ignorantly, it brings us all our misery. Used wisely, its power of developing health and happiness is limitless. It is essential to a just understanding of it, and to the knowledge of how to help oneself, that the reader bear in mind the central thought of each of the foregoing chapters. For we have learned that all power acts through something, and in order to understand how the realization of the spirit can break up an organic or chronic physical disease, so-called, one must remember how such a disease is built up and what the power behind thought really is. We have seen that the inherited beliefs, the borrowed opinions and fears, the troublesome mental pictures, the description of symptoms made by doctors, and the whole thought process whereby a disease is made out of the disturbance which nature would have cured, had she been permitted, is impressed upon the spiritual matter and then reflected in the body. All this must be changed, the mental attitude, the spiritual matter, and the physical body, by another and more powerful direction of mind, not of the personal self alone, but a realization which, consciously and intelligently, opens the individual to the healing power, to the same power on a higher plane, which unconsciously heals the ignorant enthusiast at the shrine, believes him no wiser because he has no understanding of it. To many people it seems impossible that a person in a quiet attitude of mind can wield such power as this, and actually penetrate with the power of the spirit to the very core of a diseased state and break it up, overcoming density and contraction in the muscles and tissues of the body which no physical remedies can affect. Yet this has been done repeatedly, and done, too, by those who knew precisely what they were doing and how they did it. The right use of this quiet, penetrating thought is a science, and every detail of this present analysis of the healing process is based on actual experience in performing just such cures. The whole matter is simplified by remembering that the body is composed of minute particles which may be driven farther apart by the attenuated substance which forms the connecting link between thought and the physical state. Matter is not an inert mass. It is imbued with life, and thought can penetrate to that resident life and become consciously connected with it. The power used by thought is greater than the power which binds the particles together, for it is the spirit, and it can become the master, and is, in fact, constantly used by man in a masterful way, with scarcely a suspicion of the wonderful power he is wielding. 1. The first fact to note, then, is that the power of self-help is with us like the air we breathe, awaiting our openness to it. In the moments of calm decision before referred to, when we master our fears or decide upon this better conduct in preference to that sinful act, we do not have to fix the decision in mind and say, "This shall be so." The decision itself is an act of will, like the desire to move the arm, and is put into effect unconsciously to us. In the same way, the ideal of adjustment to life and the daily effort to gain one's poise is effective in proportion to the clearness and strength of our thought and the confidence we put into it. The first essential is a healthier and wiser habit of thought, for the ideas that we have inherited and grown up with are narrow and cramping to the soul. It is our personal duty to have the right thought. Our own organism will see that it is executed. We do not need to fight the wrong thoughts, nor argue them away. It is enough for man to sow the new seed. Nature will attend to its growth. If the reader has carried out the suggestions of Chapter 1 and tried to actualize these vital truths in daily life, or to realize the power of silent receptivity, it must already be clear that this is the most direct method of touching the inner center. For with realization of the near presence of the immanent spirit comes the conviction that it is competent, more competent than we, to minister to our truest and deepest need. A quieting influence, a sense of power and restfulness steals upon us, removing all fear and doubt. The mere effort to become inwardly still is sufficient to awaken this sense of power, as though one were for the moment a magnetic center toward which radiate streams of energy. And if the reader has sought this silence in order to get relief from pain or some other uncomfortable sensation, there was doubtless a consciousness of pressure or activity in some part of the being, as though the resident power were trying to restore equilibrium. To unite in thought with this quicker power is, in general terms, the first step in the process of self-help by the silent method. There is obviously no general rule which should govern the thought process, because no two troubles and no two individuals are wholly alike. Sometimes one needs mental rousing, and the thought should be clear, strong, and decisive. Again, there should be little active thought, and on general principles, the central thought of this volume, The Power of Silence, is at once the quickest and surest means of self-help. It is this power and the attitude which invites it which one should be conscious of, not of the pain, the fatigue, or the depression from which one wishes to be free. This power or spirit is shut out during trouble. There is resistance to it and contraction in some part of the body. In order to overcome this resistance, one should open out inwardly. Try to find the inward center where the power is pressing through, or the center of repose described in the foregoing chapter, and simply to search for it and to rely upon this quickening power is sufficient not only to draw one thought away from physical sensation, but to be immensely refreshed by the renewing presence. For through this experience of receptivity, it is an experience rather than a process of thought. One becomes connected with a boundless reservoir of life and healing power. The healing process is, in fact, one form of receiving life. We do not originate life. We use it. We are animated by it, for it already exists. Our individual life is a sharing of universal life. We possess it by living it, and to partake of it is the commonest yet the highest privilege of man. In order to make this experience vivid and clear, let us compare the soul to the budding life which is trying to open its petals and expand into a beautiful flower. The soul has been through a round of experiences in ignorance of their meaning. It has come into rude contact with the world and has sought to withdraw from the world's wickedness and misery. In thus withdrawing, it has shut into a narrow space the mental pictures and remembrances of the experience that were repulsive to it. It has narrowed and cramped itself into this prison of its own selfhood, unaware that it was thereby shutting in experiences which must sometime be opened out. In the meantime, the resident life, active in the soul as in the bud, is trying to expand it and to open it out into the sunlight of truth. This activity, being misunderstood, causes fear, and the soul in ignorance would draw still more, cramping itself, this time with the sanction of medical opinion. Now, the thought of the one who understands this inner process penetrates to the center where the imprisoned soul is trying to come forth and gradually sets it free. For it is the nature of these deep realizations of the spirit to cause expansion, to touch the soul, and the accompanying power is equal to overcoming any obstruction in its pathway. The expanding process may not always be pleasant, and oftentimes one feels restless and impatient to have it completed. It may require long and trustfully persistent effort to overcome a condition of long standing, for people do not easily yield their opinions and beliefs. At times it is only necessary to open oneself in silence for a few moments in order to take off the pressure and become wonderfully refreshed. Again, one has to try all methods: to read a comforting book, to think of some friend, or a person in distress to whom one would like to be of service, to rouse one's self with a firm determination to rise above this troublesome difficulty, to push through it with a persistently positive thought, or do anything which shall quiet the inner center and take one out of self. But in all cases, one should approach this experience with a quiet confidence that the resident power is fully equal to the occasion. It is here with the imprisoned soul. Help abounds. The Spirit awaits our cooperation. We belong to it. We need not fear. We only need to be open to it, to let it come, to let it have us and heal us. It knows our needs and is never absent from us. We are not so badly off as we seemed, nor is there any reason for worry or discouragement. Peace, peace. Let us be still, quiet, restful, and calm. Let us be still, quiet, restful, and calm. Let us know and feel the eternal presence which is here to restore us and to calm the troubled waters with its soothing love and peace. In due time, if this realization be repeated until one learns how to be still and receptive, one will surely become conscious of benefit and a quickening of the whole being. The mere form of words is nothing, and the above expressions are simply used in the hope that they may suggest the indescribable. For once more, it is the spirit which is the essential, the power behind the words, the experience which all must have in order to know its depth and value. The ability to concentrate in the secret of self-help by this method of realization, and this is an art which each man learns in his own way. There must be a certain degree of self-possession in order to hold the attention in a definite direction, and if one have not yet developed this ability, it is well to approach this deeper realization by degrees, according to the method of Chapter 6. The process of silent help is, in fact, one of adjustment to the actual situation in the moment of trouble, the realization that, individually, one has little power, even of the will, as compared with this higher will, but that all that is demanded of the individual will is cooperation. God seems to need us as much as we need Him. He asks thoughtful receptivity and readiness to move with the deepest trend of individual life. The whole experience is rather a wise directing of the will or attention, a realization rather than a process of active thought. The adjustment, the poise, the experience of silence is a realization. The moment comes when the individual has nothing to say. The power of conscience, thought, becomes subordinated to a higher power, the spirit, one cannot speak. One can only observe in silent wonder, in awe at the presence of such power, which the individual feels incompetent to control. This, in a word, is the highest healing, the most effective, the least personal, and the hardest to describe. One can only say, here is the life, the love, the spirit. I have dwelt with it for a season. Go thou to the fountainhead. It will speak to you and be its own evidence. This experience may be further described as a settling down into the present life. In all cases of illness, there seems to be a withdrawing of the spiritual matter or body, as though the person were partially disconnected from the physical body for the time being. This is especially noticeable in cases of nervous shock and nervous strain. That high-strung tendency which is made known through the voice, when the whole individual seems to be living in the top of the head. In such cases, the effort should be to keep soul and body together and never let the one pull away from the other, to come down into the living present, to cease striving after ideals and dwelling in certain high-strung directions of thought, and never to invite any thought or experience which tends to take one away from wise and healthful adjustment to the eternal now. This is one of the quickest and most effective means of self-help. This settling down, calmly and quietly into one's deeper and larger self, into present usefulness and equanimity, where reside the greatest strength and the greatest power. But sometimes one is unable to penetrate to the source of all knowledge and to connect in thought with the omnipresent life. The spirit seems far from one, and one feels wholly separate from it. In such cases, it is better to make the realization more personal, just as one would rely on a friend who is ready to perform the slightest service and be a constant comfort during severe illness. One would naturally be drawn to such a friend in ties of close sympathy and trust. In moments of weakness and despair, the friend would be one's better self, full of hope and cheer. It is in such times as this that our friends are nearest and dearest to us, that we open our souls to them and show what we really are. The mother's love, the friend's devotion, is thus the means of keeping many a soul in this present life when all other means have failed. Failed because they could not touch the soul, whereas the communion of soul with soul through the truest affection opens the door to that higher love, which thus finds a willing object of its unfailing devotion. Now, if in moments of trouble like these the reader will turn to the Spirit as to an intimate friend, help will surely come. The higher self is still with one, but it is shut out. It is near, it is ready, like the friend, to help us, to guide, to strengthen, to advise, and to bestow comfort. One is momentarily disconnected with it and unaware of its promptings. One's personal self and activity stand in the way. The human will, fear, and all sorts of opinions have intruded, causing the spirit to withdraw and placing an obstacle in its pathway. To still the active personal self and let the real self have us, to stand aside completely and let the spirit return and fill the entire being is, in a word, the secret of self-help, in this as in all cases. This is not easily done at first, and one is apt to force the wrong thoughts out of mind and try to reason them away. One often hears people say that they do not wish to think these wrong thoughts, but they cannot help it. Suppose, for example, that one has a feeling of ill will toward another, some unpleasant memory, or feels sensitive in regard to some word or act of a friend. Instead of trying to put away the unpleasant feeling by thinking about it, one should call the friend to mind and think of his or her good qualities. Think of something pleasant, some good deed or some happy memory, for there is surely some good quality in every person. Very soon the unpleasant thought will disappear, and love and charity will take its place. It was not necessary to force it away, for one cannot hold both love and hatred at the same time. This exactly describes the way out of all difficulties, as simply and briefly as it can be told. In endeavoring to find the good side of the person who has said the unkind word or acted impulsively, one soon becomes en rapport with the friend's soul, the real, the truest and deepest person, who did not mean to act unkindly and who now regrets the unkindness. One's feeling of peace and forgiveness reaches the other soul if the process be carried far enough to include both individuals in this quiet realization. One is lifted above the petty, belittling self to that higher plane of spiritual poise and restfulness. One has found one's own soul, and to find this, in moments of trouble, discouragement, sorrow, or sickness, this is self-help. Here is the inner kingdom of heaven, a whole kingdom, where dwells all love, wisdom, and peace, whence we can draw power at our need and become readjusted to life. Here's where the permanent consciousness should abide. Here is the home of the greatest happiness and the truest health, a happiness and a health which only ask our recognition in order to become fully and consciously ours in daily life, morally, intellectually, and physically, lending an unwordable joy to every moment of existence. 2. On the intellectual plane, it is usually more difficult to find the inward center and to realize the power of silence. The generally accepted opinions and education prevent one from getting into this higher state. Its own knowledge, its pride of intellect and assurance, make it difficult for the mind to surrender. And there is, consequently, much more resistance to be overcome. One is apt to forget that, so far as one has thought out the truth, that truth is universal. It is not the property of the individual alone. The very intellect whereby the truth was discovered is a product or gift of the immanent life, is an individualization of the larger intellect. Just as life is a sharing of the immanent and bountiful life in which we dwell, and of which we are not in any sense independent. Only the mere opinion or belief is purely personal, and it is usually just this personal element that stands in the way, some harmful or borrowed opinion, which prevents one from getting real wisdom. It is humility, willingness to learn, which opens one to the all-knowledge within. And if one approach this experience in a purely intellectual attitude, one is not likely to feel the warmth of the spirit, since everything depends on the receptivity or direction of mind. In such cases as, in fact, in all cases of trouble and suffering, the mind revolves in a channel that is too narrow. One needs to escape into a larger life out of this narrow sphere of consciousness which has dwarfed and limited one's development. The very principles, the very habits, whereby one becomes devoted to a certain line of work to the exclusion of all others, causes the mind to flow in given channels and never to pass beyond them. If this process be long continued, with but little rest or recreation, nature is sure to rebel and to warn us that we must be wiser and broader in our thinking. And probably the surest way of getting out of ruts and thereby avoiding the long list of troubles ending in insanity, which results from the constant pursuit of one idea, is to realize our relation to the universal life in which our own qualities of intellect and power inhere, and which demands us all around development, that we may come into full self-possession and complete soul freedom. Rightly used, then, the intellect is the basis. It gives the only firm basis on which to rest the superstructure of the spiritual life. 3. On the physical plane, the first essential is to explain to the sufferer that the healing power is present in the body, ready to restore all hurts, and that if the person will keep still, like the animals, all will go well. On this plane, one is in need of a wise counselor to restore confidence and allay fear. The healing power meets with little or no resistance in the child, and if medicine be kept away and no disturbing influence or fear be allowed to interfere with the natural process, the mother can better fill this office than anyone else. But here, as on all planes and in all cases, there's a grand opportunity for the wise physician who, instead of making a diagnosis of the sick person, describing symptoms and giving medicine, shall quietly explain the healing process and how one should become adjusted to it. In all cases of sickness, the sufferer needs comfort, needs to be told how to relax and take off the resistance. And in all finely organized people, some understanding of the inner process already described is essential in order to explain the keen and subtle sensations which would otherwise arouse the wildest fears. What a change would come to sick and suffering humanity if all physicians would adopt this helpful method and cease all this disease-creating talk about symptoms. If people would throw off all slavery to medical opinion. The best doctors would still have plenty to do, and there would still be need of skillful surgeon. The world's suffering would be infinitely less, and we should then have an army of men striving to teach all-round self-development and good health. 4. In order to help those who are unable to get this inner help themselves, the first step is to find this same inner center and to realize for another the same peace and rest which is required for oneself. This should usually be accompanied by an audible explanation of the inner process and how best to become adjusted to it. One person can help another only so far as one's soul is developed in knowledge of an openness to the immanent life. But during the quiet realization for another, the same process will be caused in the other if the person be receptive. One should therefore have confidence that help will come to the recipient, not through one's personal self, but through the quickening of this same power within the receptive soul, and with this trust uppermost and a deep desire to help the other person, a good result is sure to follow. There is no effort to make a hypnotic suggestion in this experience of helping another, nor any attempt to transfer one's thought or feeling, but a realization of the needs and possibilities of the other soul. One cannot be in the presence of a person who is thus aware of the very presence and power of the Spirit without feeling the effect, consciously or unconsciously. Simply to meet a person who has spiritual repose is sufficient to cause a beneficial effect. To express it in the phraseology of Oriental thinkers, the same vibration is set up in the recipient, and there are those whose perception is so keen that they can detect the changes in vibration during a quiet sitting with a patient who is receiving help by the silent method. It is only necessary for these intuitively acute people to become en rapport with another person in order to perceive at once how, to continue the same phraseology, the person is vibrating, or, more accurately, the surrounding atmosphere or spiritual matter which reveals the state of mind. If the agitation be intense, it must be stilled, not by entering into the agitation, but by keeping free from it, standing on the outside of it, just as one would observe any change taking place in the outer world. The vibrations will gradually change, the agitation will cease, there will be a tendency on the part of the recipient to draw deep breaths, and finally, a general feeling of quiet invigoration will displace the agitated condition both of mind and body. It may take many sittings to produce such a change as this, but the process is, in general terms, the same, namely a gradual quieting of all agitation by penetrating nearer and nearer the center where the resident life meets resistance, and maintaining a quiet realization of the power that is producing the cure. 5. But the best and most lasting self-help, after all, is that wiser habit of thought, that larger helpfulness for which this whole volume pleads. For it is what we think and dwell upon habitually that molds character and sheds its influence on the people about us. Our inquiry has taught us to look beneath matter to its understanding reality, and behind physical sensation to the mind where it is perceived. We have found the origin of man, first in the immanent life of which he is a part, and of which he is an individual expression, and secondly, in the world of mind, where his beliefs and impressions gather to form his superficial self. To know the one self from the other, to be adjusted to its resistless tendency, to obey it, to do nothing contrary to it, as far as one knows, is the highest righteous, the most useful life, and the truest religion. Here is the one essential, the life that is most worthy of the man aware of his own origin and his own duty. There are many problems involved in an interpretation of life which we have neglected in this inquiry, noticeably those connected with the religious life and the great religious teachers. We have everywhere met an element that is incommunicable, that must be lived and practiced in order to be known. There is much that can only be understood through patient investigation, much too that would well repay scientific investigation. Facts and possibilities are revealed through careful study of the inner process, which throw a flood of light alike on the nature of mind and on the mystery of life. The thought is well nigh overwhelmed by the scope and meaning of these inner experiences. It seems almost impossible even to suggest such insights and experiences to the general reader, for one must talk enigmatically at times and rely on the reader's forbearance and willingness to test that which can only be proved through a similar experience. But it is everything to know that such possibilities exist and to make a step toward their realization. It is enough, at first, to be turned in the right direction, to feel that help is for us and only awaits our receptivity, to have some inkling of the great power of silence. All else will come in due course if one have a deep desire for it. And if we have considered the one essential and begun to realize its deep meaning for ourselves and for our fellow beings, the larger, more complex life of the outer world will be explained by the light and wisdom from within. For who shall limit the possibilities of the one whose life is centered in this spiritual consciousness, the one who knows the real and can tell it from the transient and elusive? Do we have more than the faintest glimmering of our own possibilities, we who live beholden to matter as if it were the all in all? Have we really begun to live? Are we even half what we should be, whiffed about as we are by opinions and fears, at the mercy of other minds and of our own unconquered selves? Half the facts of life go to show that man is a product of matter, and his thoughts and feelings mere effects of fateful outer cause. The other half show that he is a master in embryo, it may be, but a sharer of the only life and the only power by virtue of his individual will and his invincible power of thought. Life and all it brings him, ultimately, depends on his own wisdom and the intelligence he puts into it. He is weak and fearful, at the mercy of matter and passion, only as long as he lacks understanding. To know self and overcome it, to know the law and obey it, this is the sum of righteousness, and all that duty demands of us at first is to make the start, to remember nature's law of growth, and persistently to keep the great end in view. End of chapter, and also the end of the reading of the book titled The Power of Silence by Horatio W. Dresser. Please do hit the like button, let me know you were here, leave me a comment, and if you know of someone that could benefit from this book, please share it with them and subscribe to the channel.